Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is Faye Al-Snair, Chair of IEEE BSAU Student Branch. Thank you for joining today our safe day for the webinar of from the Renewable Energy and Power System series of and let's talk about role of the smart grading facilitating the integration of renewables. Today we would like to introduce and welcome our guest for today, Professor Saifur Rahman. He's professor in electrical and computer engineering, past president IEEE Power and Engineering Society, professor and director Virginia Tech Advanced Research Institute. So I would like to pass the mic to Professor Saifur Rahman.
Okay, thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to this seminar presentation for this evening. I will talk about two items focusing on smart grid and facilitating how we integrate renewables into the grid. So one is smart grid, one is renewables. I'll then put the two together. You have on the bottom of my screen my website, my full name, saifurrahman.org. I will put these slides on that site tomorrow or tonight. If you want to see the whole slide deck, you can go there and pick it up from there. Okay, let me move on. This is my rooftop solar at Virginia Tech, which is very clean because of snow and rain. On the top, I'm showing you again my website, my fullname.org. I am giving you this not to show you my rooftop solar, more importantly, show you the now, saifurrahman.org, you'll see this picture. Once you see this picture, if you go to the next page, you'll see this. This is a page where I publish all my presentations. The one I'm going to show you now, or I'm showing you now, will show up on this page your time tomorrow morning. My point is, if you want to know more about different topics I speak on, they're all here for your reference. Okay, now, question is, as an engineer, we ask the question, if you have some new idea that comes before you, you ask as an engineering student, faculty, what is it? Can you define it for me? This is a definition that I have come up with to define smart grid. Smart grid, very different. Smart grid is a concept, not something physical. It's a concept with many elements where monitoring and control of each element in the chain of generation, transmission, distribution, and end use allow electricity to be delivered in an efficient way. So very, very many things, generation, transmission, distribution, end use, all are connected. The end game is, or end goal is to provide efficient delivery of electricity. That's the objective. Now, if you talk about the word grid, this is the word grid means this. Grid means a network. This picture is a network for power transmission. If you focus your attention to the power grid, it is quite smart already, very smart already, because of different equipment, fax devices, PM units, and the like, very efficient. So we are not focusing on this part of the grid when you talk about smart grid, something different. Well, then the question is, why do you want to develop and run a smart grid? What is the motivation? Well, here it is. We want to make the grid. Now the grid includes transmission, distribution, and end use. All of that is grid in my definition here. Therefore, we want to make the grid smarter, safer, reliable, and more cost-effective using advanced sensors, communication technologies, and distributed computing. A lot of things. One thing you notice here, I did not say cheap. I said cost effective. In fact, smart grid is very expensive. very expensive. Why you do it? Because it does other things for us. And I'll tell you what other things it does for us. To give you a simple distinction between a smart grid and normal grid, let me show you this picture. That's how we define the difference between normal grid and smart grid. On the left-hand side, none of you have seen this, too young for this. You have a rotary dial black telephone, which was the phone used by millions of people for last, well, till about 1990s. Before that, it was this phone. After that, we got the smartphones. In the last 20 years, we get the smartphones. Now, the phone on the left, normal phone, cost about $10, $12 US. The phone on the right costs what, this is your iPhone 12, costs $1,200. Something $12 and $1,200. Phone is a phone. You used to make a phone call. If you want to make a phone call only, you don't need to spend $1,200. You spend that much money because that device on the right-hand side of my screen, smartphone, allows you to make phone calls. It also allows you to do social media, like we're doing now. You can do this. You can do camera. You can do calculations. You can do email. You can do Instagram, all of these. Because this phone gives you more functions you can use, you don't mind spend $1,200. If you want to make just a phone call, you don't need this expensive smartphone. Therefore, I will need the smart grid to do many things for me, not just providing power from the power plant to the home. If that's the objective, you don't need all of this. That's the background we're working on. Now, then the question is, where does the smart grid end and where does it stop? Excuse me. It starts obviously at the power station or the generator. Then you have transmission line, which moves power over long distances from the power plant to the load. But it is not coming straight to your home, the transmission line. You have to have a distribution network which will connect the high voltage transmission line to your local transformer. You have a distribution network which will provide power to homes, buildings, businesses, and then finally that power comes to the end use, which is your air conditioner, refrigerator, and so on and so forth. That is why I say the smart grid starts at the generator and ends at the refrigerator. That's the whole smart grid. How can you make your meter more smart, your network more smart, your network protection more smart, transformers more smart? All that is part of the discussion today. Okay, now, then the question is, what are the building blocks of a smart grid? But here it is. On the top of my pyramid is technology, like smart meters, smart switches. Those things exist today. You can buy smart meters in Saudi Arabia, no problem. That's done. Second block is standards. You realize with this new technology, smart meters, smart grid, there are many vendors, many companies manufacturing these devices. Why do we need standards? We have to make sure Saudi Electric Company wants to buy electric smart meters. They have 5 vendors to buy from. All those vendors which are manufacturing and selling smart meters must follow some standards so that interoperable. In other words, Saudi Electric buys smart meters from company A in Switzerland, company B in Canada, company C in US, company D in China. All of them have to work together. That's the standards issue. That work has been done pretty much because we are using smart meters from different countries already in applications. Done. Next is rates and regulations. As you realize, like in Saudi Arabia, on a very hot summer day, the demand for power is very, very high because everybody running their air conditioners, everybody. If you can give some incentive to some people that, yes, you can run the air conditioner, but if you use higher temperature setting, instead of 22 degrees centigrade, make it 25 degrees centigrade, then AC will run less frequently and save energy. But people do not do that unless you give them some incentive, meaning some savings, money. That's what we mean by rates and regulations. And that's happening in the US and some other countries, but not widespread yet. But why do you need that? Smart meters. What happens, smart meter will calculate how much energy you are using from 3 to 6 p.m. on a hot summer afternoon in Riyadh, as an example. That's the value of the smart meter. Then also the smart meter will tell you, send you a message that now we're entering 3 p.m. The power demand will be high, price will be high. So take some action to reduce the demand by changing some thermostat set points or dimming some lights or turning something off. That's the message you get from them, and it takes some action. That's what you mean by impact of rates and regulations on energy usage. Good. The last box is the blue one at the bottom, consumer awareness and education. That's very important. If you and me do not know what I just said, like prices are going up, use less energy, you'll save money, all that information has to be made available to you as the end user, otherwise you don't participate. That's a challenge for us as academics. We have to have programs, discussion groups, so that our families, your parents, your cousins, your uncles, aunts know what is the value of smart meter. Because as I said, smart grid is not cheap. They have to spend money. Unless you tell them, explain to them, spending money now will help them save money later on, they would not be convinced to use smart grid network. That's the objective. Now, this is the evolution of the grid. How is the grid evolving over time? If you focus your attention on the top third of my screen, you see I call it before smart grid. One-way power flow, simple interactions. See it here, normal thing. Power station, step-up transformer, long-distance transmission line, neighborhood local area step-down transformer, distribution line in your home. This is going on for 130 years now in the US. It's normal. What is new is the bottom half of my screen. I call it after smart grid. Here you see, in addition to the power station transmission line, you see wind turbines, you see battery storage, you see solar panels, you see electric vehicles. Those are new stuff, right? That's why we need the smart grid. Also, you see here on this page, these blue dotted lines, which did not exist in the past. Before smart grid picture doesn't have the blue line. What does the blue line represent? These represent communication network. As I said, your meter will tell you that the power price going up at 3 o'clock. How does it know? There's a telecom network sending data, not power, from the power company control center to your meter. That's the relationship between communication and power flow. We'll come back to that in a few minutes. Look at this picture. This is my prediction next 10 years or so. Smart grid will not happen overnight. It will take time. Before we get there, we'll have what I say here, intelligent, interconnected microgrids. Each box on this page in my picture has some buildings, rooftop solar, and in the middle, you see a box like a modem. That's representing communication network between the buildings and so on and so forth. Some buildings have electric vehicle, the green one on the top. Other buildings have other load, like a microgrid on the right-hand side has battery backup. The one in the middle is a bigger microgrid, which is connected on the lower left-hand side to a wind turbine, on the upper left to a power station, and lower left to a transmission grid using a transformer. That's a bigger microgrid. What it does, this bigger microgrid is serving other smaller microgrids. That's important. Why? Because these smaller microgrids may not have enough capacity to run their network all the time. Especially in a cloudy day, solar output is less, so they are short of capacity. Then they will depend on the bigger microgrid, which is connected to a power station, to a transmission network to get some help. But that's the overall setup of the microgrid-based smart grid in the future. Okay. This is the summary now. we have to then manage the new grid using power flow and information flow. Important. This picture coming up now is the power infrastructure, meaning it is telling you, we have seen this already, power station, step-up transformer, long-distance transmission line, distribution substation, distribution receiving station, and then on the lower left, you got buildings with batteries, rooftop solar, in the middle, some factory, on the right-hand side are commercial buildings, and a substation may have a fuel cell, it may have other IC engines to produce power in short notice. That's a setup. That's all power related. What you have done on that network, we've superimposed an information infrastructure. What is that? Those red lines are representing communication lines. Also, these red lines have arrows going up and down. That means it is a two-way communication. You get a message from the power company, you send a message back to them. That's two-way. The power flow, it was one way. Power started at the power station and came to your home. But however, because of rooftop solar, if your demand is smaller, lower than the supply you get from rooftop solar, you'll sell power back to the utility. Then power also becomes a two-way community. That's why we need smart grid to manage all this stuff. So that's the discussion, the last 15 minutes, about the power grid and power infrastructure. Let's now move on to the second half of my talk, which is renewables. In the world today, the power network landscape is changing with wind turbines, offshore in this case, rooftop solar in Japan in these pictures, and electric vehicles. Those are new stuff. 10 years ago, they didn't exist. They're good, but there's an issue with them. What is the issue? For example, wind and solar are intermittent. That means you don't have wind and sunshine all the time. How to deal with it? Challenge. Hydro is not intermittent, but hydro is space limited. You cannot put hydro in city of Riyadh. You could put solar for sure, and maybe wind turbine as well, but not hydro. So hydro is not intermittent, but it is not there everywhere. Those are my challenges. Okay, so let's start describing, giving some examples of wind energy as it exists in the US, in my case here. So wind energy has a problem. Problem is the wind power output does not match with the demand in your territory. Data I have here from Northwestern US, Bonneville Power Administration, big utility. The blue line shows their demand and the scale on the left-hand side. The red line shows the wind output as seen in the month of January, average numbers. So on a 24-hour scale, you see two peaks, about 7 o'clock and then about 6, 7 p.m., twice a day. In the US, this is typical. Why? We have the winter time heating load, so morning heating load and evening heating load. That's why it's called dual peak. That's normal. The red line is the wind output on the average month of January in Bonneville area. You can see the highest wind output happens at 2, 3 in the afternoon, lowest at about, well, very low at 7, 8 p.m. when the peak happens. We missed in this group of pictures, we missed both the morning peak and the evening peak. We could not get enough wind to serve. That's a challenge. That's the month of January. Look at springtime, month of April. Same utility, load is blue line, wind is red line. You can see wind shape is very different now. It was like this in January, one peak. Now it is sloping down all day. So again, morning peak was seen by the wind pretty good. Wind was not bad. And about evening peak was very far away from the wind supply. That's a challenge in spring. Next is summertime. In the US, summer load should be very similar to Saudi Arabia as well. Summer load is one flat, no peak to speak of because of heavy use of air conditioners. That goes on morning till evening. Here, it's even bigger problem. The wind is the red line. You can see my peak happens at 5 o'clock p.m. Wind is the lowest in 24 hours at 5 o'clock p.m. Very good sign. Fine. Let's look at the fall. Next season, October 2013. Year doesn't matter. It's typical seasonal load shape. I have the wind output is better now than before because with the more wind in the fall season in Washington State. You see the result. In this case, the wind and output is pretty good during morning peak and bad during evening peak. Those are realities. I'm not giving you any comment, but this is how it happens, why you have to be using smart grid to make it work out better. Next picture. There was daily longer term variation. This picture is different. I'm showing you short-term wind output variation over a 24-hour period in Texas. Data from a 150 megawatt wind farm in Texas. You can see between 5 and 6 a.m., the load dropped by more than 30% in 1 minute. So not load, the wind output dropped by 30% in 1 minute. If your load drops that fast, so your demand is fixed, of course, nothing changes in the morning, but your supply drops. What do you do? This is the challenge. We can do batteries, possibly, but they're very expensive. Fine, that's one example. Next example is even more serious. Over 10 minutes, the same 150 megawatt wind farm, different day, of course. Over 10 minutes on that day, between 5 and 6 a.m., the wind output dropped by 113 megawatts out of 150. And then after a few minutes, went back up in 106 megawatts in 10 minutes again. That is a serious challenge to maintain the system if you depend only on wind. So more data in Texas. This is data for many wind farms put together. You might say, well, one wind farm can go bad, but what happens? Well, many wind farms in Texas, 4,500 megawatt, big number. Even then, you see problems for the whole state. Like January 1st, early morning, wind output was 2,200 megawatts, pretty good, begins to fall, all day falling. By 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, it is picking up again. 2nd January, it was low most of the day, then picked up in the evening. You could say, I'll buy some batteries and make up the difference when the wind is low. You can, but the battery is not going to use very long because next 2 days, you see here, wind is fine, right? So you have to justify your investment in the batteries because they're not used every day. So what can you do? I'll come back to that. That's wind. Let's look at solar. That's, again, you saw this picture before. That's my building. Very nice and clean, sunny day. In summertime, get good power. Then sunny day in winter like this. I don't get much power. What do I do? Well, we'll come back to that. In addition to that, on a daily basis, I have these variations. This is a fairly clear day, but some clouds move and coming and going. That's why outputs from the solar panel are decreasing and then going back quickly. If I could find some way to control my load for a few seconds, maybe a minute, and when the solar drops, my load also drops. I get a good match between supply and demand. Again, in the power system, our main responsibility is to make sure supply, demand, and match all the time. Then you're in good shape. So if I could have some system in my building which would reduce the demand for a few seconds to match. See, there's a gap of supply, the sharp drop of the power supply about, I don't know, 11, 12 o'clock in that day. One example, that's a clear day. If I look at a cloudy day, even worse. I would need some better storage and some kind of building automation which can manage my load, raising the temperature set point in summertime, therefore demanding less power for air conditioner, dim some lights, turn some plugs off. All of those can be done. That's us in the US in this example. Let's go to Saudi Arabia and Middle East. This is Abu Dhabi. This project on the left-hand side in Abu Dhabi is one of the biggest solar projects in the world today. 11 megawatts, big. This is a good picture, but it's not like this every day. You see the picture on the right-hand side? That's Abu Dhabi, sandstorm. When that sandstorm happens, the solar panels don't look like this on the left-hand side. They look all covered with dust. This will look like this picture with dust, not with snow. There's a difference. So if you cover it with dust, your solar output goes down. Solar output goes down, you have to deal with it. That's a challenge. Now let's come to Saudi Arabia. This is in Jeddah, King Abdullah University of Science and Technology, KAUST. I went there some years back. They have 2 megawatt rooftop solar at KAUST. That's very good, 2 megawatts, nice and clean. But it is not like this always. If I show you another picture for Saudi solar panels, looks like this, covered with dust. This is good, but this is life. You can clear the dust on the right-hand side. That takes water, takes time and money. So how much can you do? Even you clear it now, after a week, it looks like that on the thing on the left-hand side. That's the reality in Saudi Arabia. Let's look at some data from Riyadh. 2 different days. One clear week in the month of September, one not so clear week in the month of July. It's a 100 kilowatt array in Riyadh. The daytime high is 100 kilowatt, like day 1, day 2, pretty good, close to 100 kilowatt. We expect that. Clear day, no dust. In July, we pick a dusty day, which looked something like this, dusty day. On dusty day, output is half. So if you depend on the solar panel in your building, on your campus at King Faisal University, and the sandstorm comes, like this kind of storm comes, your output is half. What do? We'll talk about this later on. We can clean the thing on the roof, but that takes time and money and water, which is in short supply. Those are the challenges. Now let's look at some solutions. Here you go. The intermittency and the impact of storm, the sandstorm and the cloud are real. We can deal with those by one of the 3 ways on this picture here. First, battery storage. We know that. We talked about this already. This is fine, but battery is expensive and not always usable. The one below is not Saudi Arabia, of course. One below is what we call pumped storage hydro. In this case, we have a lower reservoir, which has a dam. You can see in front of you in the middle of this picture on the screen. And you have 6 big pipes. They are pumping power, not supplying, pumping water back from the lower reservoir near this dam to the upper reservoir on the back end of the table, this picture in this case. So now at night time or early morning hours, when your demand is low, you can pump some water back in the hill, higher elevation, and leave it there. During daytime, when you have higher demand for electricity, you let the water come down through those pipes. As the water comes down, run the generator, gives you electricity in the daytime when the demand is high. That's called pumped storage hydro. On the right-hand side, I have a different technology called compressed air energy storage, CAES. How does it work? Well, first of all, why do you need it? Any gas turbine, and it's very common in Saudi Arabia, you have to compress the air for combustion purposes, compress it. In the compression process, you need electricity, of course. Motor has to compress. If you're running these gas turbines in the afternoon high demand period, you're pulling more current or more power from the power system to compress the air first and then run the turbine. It's expensive. What we are showing here, we have this technology for compressed air energy storage. you will find a salt mine or a big underground space which is sealed to compress air during high, low demand hours like midnight or early morning, compress it using the grid power. Send the compressed air into this storage space and leave it there. During daytime, demand is high. You release that compressed air from that hole in the ground, and that compressed air goes straight to your gas turbine, which does not need to produce compressed air anymore. The air is already compressed. That saves time and energy. Example. Okay, something else is very different here, called demand response. Demand response is like load control. I've talked about dimming your lights, changing thermostat control, turning off some fans. Those are customer actions required to control the load. Why is it important? You saw those short-term variations. If you could control your load by some automated function in your building, you can take care of it. So that's the topic called demand response. Demand is responding to changing supply. Okay, now this is the difference between now and 10 years ago. Historically, we ran the system, we call it demand-driven supply. Demand is forecasted for the next day, next month, next year, next 10 years. Based on those forecasts, power company builds power stations, the 10-year forecast, or for depending on next week's demand, next day's demand, if their capacity is not enough on site, they will buy power from a neighboring utility. Those are decisions they make based on demand fluctuations. We call demand-driven. Supply has to meet the changing demand. Now things are reversed. Why? You saw the solar and wind as stuff. Those are my supply. I don't have control on them. This is God-given. The wind is not here. I cannot make it happen. Sky is cloudy. I cannot make it sunny. I cannot do that. I call it supply-driven demand. Now my demand has to adjust to meet fluctuating supply with some help from storage. I cannot do all the controls because then I'm too strict on my building user. Some battery will be needed. This is the system I call smart grid ecosystem. In this ecosystem, supply is variable, demand has to be smart to change itself so that supply demand matches in real time all the time. Okay, now this is the definition. Smart grid ecosystem. It starts at the smart building, like your campus building, which has this building automation system, change the thermostat setting, dim the light, turn some plug load off. That's a smart building. Many smart buildings in one campus can make the campus smart. Like your university, King Faisal, has many buildings. If you can put smart building technology in every building, you can have a smart campus. Now Riyadh City has many campuses. So all campuses can be smart, like this one. City of Riyadh can be smart. And then Saudi Electric Company is serving Riyadh, Dammam, Dahran, and many other places. Those will be part of the smart grid that Saudi Electric system is managing so that everything is under control. So that's my overall summary of the smart grid ecosystem. Just briefly talk about what is a smart building. What makes a building smart? Well, a building has many things: heating, ventilation, air conditioning, lighting, water supply, many sensors, security camera, fire emergency, and the like. All of these have to be under one platform so that if you go to the platform like a dashboard, you see the camera situation, fire alert, how much water is coming through, what is the temperature, what is the ventilation, what is the airflow, all of that in one building, one place for this building. That's what you call a smart building. That data is visible. Now, so trying to finish up. Now you have a campus at King Faisal University, many buildings. If I can control all those buildings at the same time, for example, one, it could be a classroom building, other could be a building for conferences. 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, classes are over. You don't need to cool the classroom building so much. On the other hand, building next door has a conference going on, many people there. They need better air conditioning because demand is high. Rather than buying more power from Saudi Electric Company, you can reduce the demand of the classroom building in a smart campus setup and provide the extra power you saved to the conference room building. That's what you call fluctuations can be managed. If I can do that, I don't need a lot of storage for the conference room building because demand is high. Don't need that. Therefore, I can save money by not buying a lot of batteries, but I have to invest in the beginning to make the building smart so that I can monitor and control the building load as needed. Okay, good. Now, finally going forward, so I have to have smart load control. I said smart versus not so smart. What is smart load control? You will change the thermostat setting by 1-2 degrees so you don't feel it. Not so smart is turn the AC off. I want to solve the problem. Turn the AC off. No demand. But that's not what I want. So I can do it without turning off. If I have this network I just talked to you about, I can size my storage, not brute force, not to buy a lot of batteries, so that I can be more efficient and less money will be spent. And finally, I should be able to control rooftop solar output by smart inverters, smart grid, so that I can adjust the output as needed. That's it, my friends. My last slide. It has my email address. In case I'm not able to answer all your questions today, please feel free to send me an email. I will be happy to answer your questions. Also, I gave you my website, srahman.org. This is more information. I gave a different one before, Saifur Rahman. This is S. Rahman. I'm using this one from my election for IEEE. So if you want to go there, srahman.org, see about my election purpose and get to know me better. I'm also on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. Here it is. I'm done. I'm going to stop sharing now so that you can go ahead and run the Q&A program going forward. So let me end the show. 1 second. Stop sharing. And I am done. So who will do the Q&A?
Yes, Mr. Saifur Rahman. I will do the Q&A. So, anyone has any question for the professor? Is there any question?
Questions, comments? Anything? Yes, please. Maybe they can also write in the chat box, right? Chat box, they can.
Okay, there's one from Turkey Al Hussein. How much does the battery storage usually cost?
Yeah, battery storage.
Oh,
Okay. Is typically 2 megawatt battery with 1 hour storage will cost you about $4 million US, 2 megawatt, $4 million.
okay, the second one from AH4AZ, I think from Twitter. So it's how much is the efficiency compresses air?
Compressed efficiency is not very high. It's about 20-30% range. But air is free, so it doesn't matter much.
Okay. There is a question from Shiraz Khan. Okay. how the smart grid allow household to generate, store renewable, renewable energy and trader excuse energy with the neighbors in a local energy market.
Yes, Dr. Khan, I like this question. And let me explain what I mean by smart grid health. For example, smart grid, your house will be part of smart grid. It will keep track of how much battery storage you have, and it'll decide for you whether when you excess capacity from rooftop solar, are you going to sell it to your neighbor or store it to sell at night when the demand and price is much higher. So when it's a smart grid, it ends at the house. You'll have a battery storage, rooftop solar, so that you can sell excess energy to your neighbors. That is called transactive energy. I'm doing research right now on this very topic. So yes, smart grid makes a smart house, smart building, battery storage, controllers, some platform in the building to decide when to sell, how much to store, how much to charge at night, for example. So that's how we'll use the smart grid to address your questions about excess energy and selling to our neighbors. Thank you.
Okay, there is one. How can we solve that problem of the renewable problem, whether in the future?
You can never solve it. It's God given. You have to deal with it, live with it. That's what I said in my talk. I cannot control the sun. I can control the cloud. Cloud can be some control possible, but not very common. I cannot control the wind. I accept that. Accepting it doesn't mean I just give up. What is the purpose of generation? To meet load, right? I have to always match supply and demand, always. If my supply is changing, I can use some storage to make up the lost supply, this battery. I can do that. But more importantly, I can control or adjust my load using this smart controls so that my demand is matching with the supply.
Okay, the next one from Ahmed. What are the most common obstacles that utilize face at the process of transforming from typical grid to smart grid?
Most common obstacles is, well, you got to redo some parts of your network so that you put sensors, meters, and controllers to watch what's going on. As I said, I cannot control my load unless I know what is the supply looking like. So biggest challenge is monitoring and control in the network status. One quick example, transformers. The load goes up, transformer reaches capacity, gets hot. If you can monitor the transformer oil temperature remotely, you can get some time to adjust how long the transformer can withstand higher temperature and what can you do to reduce that stress. So the answer is distributed monitoring and control of the network equipment in real time. Thank you.
Okay, the second one from Shavana, I think. Okay, in which area of SA we can think about wind plant?
Yes, thank you, Shavana. Good question. I've done some research in Egypt on both sides and Saudi Arabia on the Red Sea. On the Egypt side, they have a large wind farm on the coast facing the Red Sea. You, like in Jeddah, for example, if there's Red Sea on the other side, so wind is there for Egypt. I mean, wind there for you also, Saudi Arabia as well. So I would focus my attention to the Red Sea coast of Saudi Arabia for wind turbine applications. Hopefully something can be done there as well.
Okay, the second one from Muhammad. Okay, and there any example of a real and complete smart grid?
Answer is no. We are trying in the US, South Korea, Japan, some parts of Europe, China, but nobody has finished the smart grid. And it's in the beginning. It is not something you can build in a year. It's a concept. You do piece by piece. And over time, you get there. Like a transmission line is smart in many cases. Nobody has a full smart distribution network in the world. Nobody has it. But some countries have pieces of it. Korea has some, China has some, US has one example, but just a piece of the grid, which is distribution system, can be smart. Now we're talking about microgrids. We have in Chicago, New York City, they have no smart grid. Parts of it, what is meant by parts of it? We're using real-time control and monitoring with some battery storage to make the system more efficient. As I said, way in the back, objective is to make the power delivery very efficient and reliable. So that is part by part we are getting into. Thank you.
Okay, the second one from Ahmed. Can you share with us the standards for smart meter and specifications? This one.
The standards, you have to go to IEEE standards website to find the standards we have decided on smart meters. It is not publicly available. You have to go, if you're a university student, you can go to the IEEE.org website with Standards Association and look at standards. It's very complex. It could be 20, 30 page long, these standards. One example would be IEEE 1547, 1547 standard, 1547 standard. That talks about renewable energy and smart grid as well. Thank you, Ahmed.
Okay. There is another one from Abdulaziz Mansouri. What will be the role of Internet of Things and artificial intel in smart grids?
Okay, two things, IoT and AI. IoT are the devices. Like I said, I have a smart thermostat in the building, which would look at the data coming from power company, price is high, and make adjustments. That's a smart thermostat, that's an IoT device. We can buy them today, many places. That's IoT. Intel. For example, Dr. Feroz can ask that question about transactive energy and selling to neighbors. In AI is, I put some AI machine learning algorithm in my system so that I can, the system decide for me, if I got excess power now, should I sell it or should I store it for nighttime sale? Why? Nighttime power is more expensive and nighttime demand is high than daytime demand, and vice versa, depending on the season, of course. So all that data goes into my algorithm, machine learning AI, and advises me, the Professor Rahman, don't sell it now, sell at night, or sell now because many people are going to sell at night. So those are the applications of AI in smart grid. Thank you.
Okay. There is a question from from Munir. Okay, to I don't know, MWH for million. I don't know what does that mean.
Yeah, that's all right. Yeah.
Okay. What would be the effect of electric physical of on the electric grids for the next 10 or 20 years?
If we look at the predictions I'm seeing for EV penetration, like some countries say in the next 10 years, they will go all EV, for example. All those EVs have to be charged using something, either your building, your home, the street charging. So the power demand in the US is expected to double in the next 10 years, double, because of EV penetration. So there will be maybe more than that. So it's very high impact, and our grid has to be upgraded, need more generation, could be solar, could be wind, so that we are ready for it. To answer your question, in many countries, demand will double. US demand is flat for last 6 years, flat, almost no, maybe a 1% change. If we get extra demand from EVs, that demand will double in 10 years. So that's the answer to your question, Munir. Next question.
Oh, sorry. Okay. What are the trending research topics regarding smart grid?
One is, how do you adjust your load to match the variable demand? That's one. Second is, how much storage do you need so that the loss of supply can be managed by the storage? You can buy a lot of batteries, that's not research, but that costs money. Research is, what's the minimum amount of battery you can live with and keep the system running properly? And the third is, how can you change your load in the building in a smart way so that the fluctuating supply would not cause problems for you? So one is supply-based changes in the building load. Second is battery sizing. Third is, first one in my list, which is predicting the supply of electricity from PV. I've done some research, my PhD students, we can predict pretty accurately the forecast for PV output in the next 5 minutes, pretty accurately. So if I can do that, I got 5 minutes of time to design my load control, battery, and all of that. So these are the three things I think are trending research topics going forward. Thank you.
Okay. The role of IoT and the use of blockchain in smart grid enabling various applications such as smart metering and peer-to-peer energy trading.
Yes, Professor Khan. Let's look at the back and end of it. Peer-to-peer energy trading. That's a very important concept. But for that to happen, you have to maintain full accounting. Who sold how much, when, at what price? As you know, blockchain is a technology which is immutable. If you put a number in the system, nobody can change it. There's no issue of people saying, I said this, but I did not get money back, or whatever it is. So I have used blockchain for peer-to-peer energy trading. That's done. In terms of IoT role, IoT device has two roles. One is monitoring, other control. If you have blockchain, you can connect the blockchain input frame to the IoT device status. How much power is being sent through that meter, number one. What was the temperature? When did the customer change the temperature setting? How long that setting stayed, and when the setting was changed back. Similarly, the customer's rooftop PV output will be also monitored using blockchain. So you can measure every minute how much the customer is selling, how much the buyer was buying from that customer. So all there is a blockchain-based database which will be recorded, and therefore at the end of the month, when you have to do some metering and settling the buying and selling, will be all available for you. Hope that makes sense. Thank you. Good question. Next one.
Okay, the next one from Muhammad. Can you please briefly clarify the difference between grid and microgrid?
Well, I'll give two answers. If you really mean grid and microgrid, grid is a grid we saw, like South Electric is a grid, all over the country supplied by them. It's a grid. Microgrid is a small subset of that grid, which will be used to control local supply and demand. So microgrid is a microgrid, very small subset of the main grid, which is pretty all over the country. Thank you. Yeah, time is almost up, right? Get 3 minutes left, 2 minutes left. Okay.
Okay, I think this is the last one from Turkey. What is the role of the smart grid in helping the generation of renewables?
Okay. So a smart grid is two things: a network and some intelligence in the grid. So if you have intelligence in the grid about the demand changing, supply changing, then you can better deal with the renewables, because renewables are changing also. So smart grid is a tool to match supply demand in real time. So that's the way I'll answer that question. Thank you.
Okay, there's no more questions, so I think we will stop to here. Thank you, Professor Saif Rahman. And actually, we would like to present this certificate. Wait a minute. As a thankfulness for providing information and your acknowledgement for the community. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care. Okay. Any other comments, questions? No? All done?
No, there's no questions.
I'm going to leave the studio now. Okay, I'm in the studio now.